The scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine clung to Liam's old flannel shirt, a familiar comfort on this brisk Tuesday morning. He sat on his porch swing, a chipped ceramic mug warming his hands, and watched the mist burn off the dew-kissed leaves of his prized rose bushes. Beyond them, nestled beneath a gnarled oak, stood the shed. It was a rustic, somewhat weather-beaten structure, its wood faded to a soft gray, a crooked window hinting at the passage of time. To an outsider, it was nothing special, perhaps even an eyesore to those with a penchant for suburban perfection. To Liam, it was the beating heart of his small, inherited sanctuary. His grandfather, Old Man Hemlock, had built it with his own hands over 60 years ago. Every knot in the timber, every rusty hinge, every faint paint smudge held a story. It wasn't just a place to store tools. It was where Liam had learned to whittle, where he'd listened to his grandfather's tall tales, and where, after Old Man Hemlock passed, he'd found solace amidst the lingering scent of sawdust and pipe tobacco. It was a monument to a bond, a repository of a legacy. Liam had inherited the modest house 2 years ago, a welcome escape from the relentless grind of city life, and the shed had been his first project, not to renovate, but to meticulously preserve. Tranquility shattered with the screech of tires on asphalt. A gleaming white SUV, so new it still smelled of factory leather even from Liam's porch, skidded to a stop directly across from his property line. It was Karen Maxwell's vehicle, unmistakable in its aggressive opulence. Karen, 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since she and her husband, a perpetually harried man named Todd, who seemed to exist solely to nod at Karen's pronouncements, had moved into the newly constructed McMansion next door. 2 weeks of passive-aggressive comments about his untrimmed hedges, the rustic charm of his garden, and the disruptive presence of his ancient oak tree. Liam sighed, bracing himself. He took a long, fortifying gulp of coffee. Karen emerged from the SUV, her designer tracksuit a stark contrast to the garden's natural palette. Her blonde bob was impeccably coiffed, her sunglasses perched atop her head like a tiny, aggressive crown. She marched with purpose, a clipboard clutched in one hand, towards his picket fence. "Good morning, Liam." Her voice, though pitched to sound pleasant, had an underlying steel that grated on nerves. "Morning, Karen," Liam replied, his tone deliberately calm, resisting the urge to roll his eyes. He remained seated. He'd learned quickly that standing up only invited a more prolonged, performative confrontation. She stopped at the fence, peering, over the top with a look of barely concealed distaste. Her gaze swept over his lush, slightly wild garden, then snagged on the shed. Her lips thinned. "Liam, we need to talk about this structure," she said, her voice dropping a notch, as if discussing something unspeakable. Liam followed her gaze. "The shed?" "Yes, the shed," she emphasized the definite article as if it were a dirty word. "Todd and I have been discussing it, and frankly, it's quite an eyesore. It's detracting from the aesthetic of the neighborhood, and frankly, our property value." Liam stared at her. "It's a garden shed, Karen. It's been here for decades." "Well, now we're here," she countered with a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And new standards apply. This isn't some rural homestead, Liam. This is Crestwood Estates. There are certain expectations. Our view from the patio, for instance, is directly impacted." She gestured vaguely towards her sprawling, manicured lawn, which from her patio would have a clear line of sight to his shed. "It's on my property," Liam stated, his voice losing some of its earlier calm. "Technically," she conceded, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "But it's so close to the line, and it's just so rustic. We had a landscaping consultant out, and he suggested that for optimal visual flow and neighborhood harmony, it really should be removed." Liam finally stood up, placing his mug carefully on the porch railing. "A landscaping consultant suggested my shed should be removed? Karen, that's absurd." It's not absurd, Liam. It's about maintaining property values and a consistent neighborhood aesthetic. We've invested a significant amount into our home, and we expect the surrounding properties to reflect that commitment. She tapped the clipboard. I've already drafted a formal request. We can help you with the demolition costs, of course. A small contribution, say, $500, to assist with its disappearance. $500. For Old Man Hemlock's shed. For a structure that held secrets Karen could never comprehend. A bitter laugh escaped Liam. Karen, with all due respect, that shed is not going anywhere. It's part of the property, and it's staying. Her eyes narrowed. The pleasant facade cracked, revealing the sharp edges beneath. Liam, I'm trying to be reasonable. We just want to improve the overall look of the street. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to take this up with the HOA. There is no HOA here, Karen, Liam corrected, a note of weariness in his voice. This isn't a gated community. This is an old neighborhood. We don't have those kinds of restrictions. Flicker of surprise, then something akin to fury crossed her features. Well, there should be one, and if there isn't, perhaps it's time to start one. Regardless, there are city ordinances regarding property maintenance and blight. That shed, Liam, could easily be considered a blight. It's a structurally sound building, Liam retorted, his patience wearing thin. It's kept up. It's not falling apart. It looks like something out of a horror movie, she sniffed, recoiling slightly. Look, I'm giving you a chance to be a good neighbor. Just remove it. Or, if you insist on keeping a shed, at least replace it with something modern, something that matches the standard of the other homes. No, Liam said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, a dangerous calm settling over him. The answer is no, Karen. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do. He turned to go back inside. You'll regret this, Liam. Her voice shrilled behind him. You'll see, we will not stand for this eyesore. Liam closed his front door, leaning against it, his heart pounding. He rubbed his temples. He knew this wasn't just about a shed to Karen. It was about control, about asserting her perceived dominance in the neighborhood. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that she wouldn't stop. He walked through his living room, past the old armchair where his grandfather used to read the newspaper, and out the back door towards the shed. He opened the creaking wooden door, the familiar smell of cedar and aged metal filling his nostrils. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight piercing the cracks in the walls. The shed wasn't just Old Man Hemlock's workshop. It was his grandfather's greatest secret. Years ago, Old Man Hemlock had been an engineer, but not just any engineer. He was a brilliant, eccentric visionary who dabbled in everything from bespoke clockwork mechanisms to early forays into sustainable energy. He'd lived a quiet life, but his mind had been a tempest of ingenuity, and the shed, ostensibly for gardening tools, was his true laboratory. Liam stepped inside, running a hand over the rough-hewn workbench. Beneath the years of sawdust and discarded bolts, the bench felt solid, almost impossibly heavy. He knelt, tracing the intricate, almost invisible lines on the wooden floorboards. His grandfather had called it the strong box. The shed wasn't just built from ordinary timber. The thick interlocking planks of its walls and floor were made from a rare, dense hardwood, harvested ethically from a now-protected forest his grandfather had helped preserve. He'd treated it with a proprietary blend of oils and resins that made it impervious to rot, termites, and remarkably, even most conventional cutting tools. But that wasn't the half of it. Hidden within the shed's very structure were his grandfather's final, most audacious creations. Not just tools, but prototypes. Over the past 2 years, Liam had been slowly, painstakingly working to catalog and understand them. He'd found diagrams hidden in false bottoms of old tool chests, deciphered coded journals, and pieced together the puzzle of his grandfather's later years. There was the Luminescent planter, a small ornate wooden box designed to sustain plant life indefinitely without external light, using a self-contained bioluminescent energy source. Liam had managed to get it working, and the small, glowing moss it harbored hummed with a soft, ethereal light. It had potential for off-grid agriculture, perhaps even space colonization. Its core components alone, the unique crystalline structures and bioreactive compounds, were highly valuable, easily worth 5 figures if analyzed by the right experts. Then there was the acoustic harmonizer, a complex device that looked like a brass gramophone horn attached to a series of intricate gears and polished lenses. His grandfather had claimed it could neutralize specific sound frequencies, creating zones of perfect, absolute silence. Liam had only managed to power it on briefly, the air around it seeming to thin, sounds muted, before it powered down. The rare earth magnets and precision-machined alloys inside were worth a fortune to collectors or researchers. But the real crown jewel, the reason Liam spent countless hours carefully disassembling parts of the shed's interior walls, was the modular energy cell. His grandfather's journals hinted at a compact, incredibly efficient battery that could power a small house for months, potentially years, off a single charge. Liam had located the main chamber, a reinforced cavity behind a false wall, but hadn't yet been able to open it or fully calm. The silence on the line after Liam's declaration was deeper than the muted world created by his grandfather's acoustic harmonizer. It stretched, taut and thin, until the broker's voice, now a low rumble, broke it. A grave mistake indeed. "Mr. Davies, Karen Maxwell, you say? Rest assured, her education begins now. You will see. What is your current location?" Liam, still standing on his porch, felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the morning chill. 123 Elm Street. Understood. Expect a development soon. And remember, Arthur's creations, particularly the strong box, are not mere curiosities. They are significant. Guard them well. My fee, should a tangible transaction be required, will be discussed at the appropriate juncture. For now, consider this a matter of principle. Goodbye, Mr. Davies. The line clicked dead. Liam lowered the phone, staring at Karen Maxwell's house. The pristine white walls seemed to mock him, the manicured lawn too perfect, too aggressive. He felt a surge of defiance, a quiet, simmering rage that was unlike his usual easygoing nature. Karen had crossed a line Liam hadn't even known existed until she stomped all over it. She had tried to steal a piece of his history, a piece of his future, simply because it didn't fit her superficial aesthetic. The rest of that day passed in an uneasy calm. Liam found himself pacing, checking his phone every few minutes, half expecting a new development, half dreading it. He tried to work on the luminescent planter inside the shed, but his hands trembled, his mind racing, with possibilities both good and bad. What exactly would the broker do? The man's voice had carried an unsettling weight, a quiet authority that suggested a network far more extensive than Liam could imagine. Just before sunset, a small, nondescript black sedan, the kind that blends seamlessly into any suburban landscape, cruised slowly down Elm Street. It paused briefly in front of Karen's house, then moved on, parking a block away. A moment later, a figure emerged from the car, tall and wiry, dressed in dark clothing despite the lingering daylight. The person moved with an unnerving fluidity, like a shadow detaching itself from the lengthening dusk. Liam, watching from his living room window, felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't a city official. This was something else entirely. The figure, a woman with keen, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, walked with deliberate nonchalance. She didn't approach Karen's house directly. Instead, she took a circuitous route, passing by Liam's property, her gaze lingering on the shed for a fraction of a second too long, a silent acknowledgement. Then she continued down the street, disappearing around the corner. Liam waited, his heart thudding. Nothing happened immediately. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows. Karen's house remained a fortress of perfect, ignorant tranquility. Then, just as darkness fully descended, it began. It started subtly. A flicker in Karen's living room lights, almost imperceptible. Then another, and another. Liam watched, fascinated. The flickers grew more frequent, more pronounced, until the entire house seemed to be strobing, a silent disco of electrical instability. He saw Karen's silhouette dart past a window, her movements agitated. Todd's larger frame followed, his hands gesturing wildly. The show had begun. Next, the sprinklers. Without warning, the sophisticated multi-zone sprinkler system that Karen had boasted about extensively to every new person she met erupted. Not in a gentle rhythmic spray, but in chaotic pulsing geysers that soaked her pristine lawn, her ornamental shrubs, and even, to Liam's suppressed delight, the side of her gleaming white SUV. The water pressure seemed to fluctuate wildly, alternating between a weak drizzle and a violent, muddy deluge. Liam could hear Karen's shriek even through his closed window. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated outrage. He allowed himself a small, private smile. This was the broker's handiwork. Precise, annoying, designed to cause maximum inconvenience and minor chaos without leaving a trace of direct evidence. This wasn't about physical damage. It was about psychological warfare. The following morning, the street hummed with a different kind of tension. Karen's lawn was a muddy mess, flattened in patches by the rogue sprinklers. The side of her SUV was streaked with dirt. Liam, sipping coffee on his porch swing, observed as Mark, the demolition man from yesterday, pulled up in his truck again, this time with a grimace on his face. He watched Mark get out and walk over to Karen's door. He couldn't hear the conversation, but Karen's furious gesticulations were clear enough. Mark held up his hands defensively, shaking his head. It was obvious she was demanding he return to demolish the shed, and he was refusing. Eventually, Mark retreated, driving off with a weary shake of his head. Karen, fuming, saw Liam watching. Her eyes, usually narrowed in disdain, now burned with something akin to hatred. She marched towards her property line, stopping just shy of her ruined lawn. "This is your doing, isn't it?" she snarled, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "The lights, the sprinklers, that demolition crew refusing to work. You're harassing me." Liam lowered his coffee mug slowly. "Now, Karen, why would I do something like that? Perhaps your new high-tech house is having some teething issues?" He managed to keep his face impassive, though a tiny flicker of amusement danced in his eyes. "Don't play innocent with me, Liam. I know it was you. You're trying to intimidate me." "Intimidate you, Karen? About what? My shed? The one you tried to illegally demolish yesterday? Because if you think flickering lights and a soggy lawn are intimidating, you clearly haven't had a very intimidating life." Her face flushed crimson. "I'm calling the police. This is harassment, vandalism." "Please do," Liam said, gesturing towards her house with an open hand. "And be sure to mention that you sent a demolition crew onto my property without my permission or a valid permit. I'm sure they'll be very interested in that part of the story." She sputtered, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish out of water. She knew she was caught. The threat of legal action against her for the illegal demolition attempt instantly deflated her righteous anger. She stomped back inside, slamming her door so hard the sound echoed down the street. Liam knew this was only the beginning. The broker had promised developments, and this felt like a mere opening volley. But it had bought him time. He needed to prepare to secure the shed even further and to understand the full implications of what he had unleashed by calling the broker. He spent the next few days working obsessively inside the shed. He reinforced the door frame, installing a complex series of deadbolts that his grandfather had designed, their mechanisms so intricate they bordered on art. He activated more of the hidden alarm systems, subtle pressure plates under the floorboards, that would send a silent alert to his phone, and small motion-activated lights that would illuminate any intrusion. He also delved deeper into his grandfather's journals, trying to find more information about the broker. The entries were sparse, mostly cryptic notes about connections and facilitators. It seemed Arthur Hemlock had used the broker's services periodically over the years, usually for acquiring rare materials or discreetly moving prototypes. The recurring theme was trust, absolute and unshakable. "The broker knows the true value," one entry read. "He will ensure its protection for a price that is fair, but never cheap." Liam realized he hadn't fully considered the price part. The broker worked on principles, yes, but also on profit. What would he demand once Liam needed to truly monetize one of his grandfather's inventions? It was a worry for another day, though. Right now, protection was paramount. A week passed. The skirmishes continued, escalating subtly. Karen's Wi-Fi would mysteriously cut out at inconvenient times. Her smart home devices would glitch, playing loud, bizarre opera music in the middle of the night or randomly blasting the air conditioning on full Arctic blast in the summer heat. Small, irritating things that caused immense frustration, but no real damage. Karen's fury simmered, visible in her sharp glares and abrupt movements whenever Liam was in sight. One afternoon, Liam was meticulously cleaning the glass lenses of the acoustic harmonizer when his phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Neighborhood Association meeting, Tuesday, 7 p.m., Crestwood Community Hall, agenda, property standards." Liam stared at the text. Karen. She was trying to form an HOA, to create the very restrictions she claimed didn't exist, all to gain leverage over his shed. This was her next move, a political flanking maneuver. He knew he had to go. Tuesday evening, Liam arrived at the Crestwood Community Hall, a small, somewhat dilapidated building that clearly hadn't seen much community activity in years. Inside, a scattering of residents sat uneasily in folding chairs. Most were older, long-time residents like Liam's grandfather had been, with a few curious newer faces. And then there was Karen, front and center, radiating an almost visible aura of self-importance. Beside her sat Todd, looking particularly uncomfortable. Karen stood up as Liam entered, her eyes narrowing. "Ah, Liam, glad you could make it." Her tone was laced with condescension. Liam simply nodded, taking a seat at the back. Karen cleared her throat, tapping a pen against her clipboard. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. As you know, Todd and I recently moved into Crestwood, and we've been absolutely charmed by the potential of this neighborhood." She paused, scanning the faces, before her gaze landed back on Liam. "However, The municipal zoning record arrived 2 days later, not through the mail, but left discreetly in Liam's mailbox, tucked inside an unassuming flyer for a local pizza joint. It was a thick, official-looking envelope, weighty with legal documents, blueprints, and handwritten notes. The broker was efficient, almost frighteningly so. Liam brought it inside, his hands trembling slightly, and spread its contents across his grandfather's old kitchen table. The document was complex, filled with architectural jargon, survey markers, and bureaucratic stamps. It detailed the original subdivision plans for Elm Street, the historical usage of the properties, and critically, the planning permissions granted for the construction of Karen and Todd Maxwell's McMansion at 125 Elm Street. Liam wasn't a lawyer, nor an architect, but his grandfather's journals had inadvertently given him a crash course in deciphering technical schematics. Arthur Hemlock had been meticulous in his documentation, not just of his inventions, but of the very land his shed stood upon. Hours passed. Liam traced property lines with his finger, cross-referenced dates, and squinted at faded blueprints. He felt like a forensic detective, sifting through layers of history. Karen, meanwhile, had upped her game. He'd woken that morning to his driveway meticulously blocked by a delivery truck offloading an enormous, ostentatious fountain for her backyard. It had taken him an hour of frustrated calls to get the truck moved, costing him valuable time he could have spent with the documents. The passive-aggressive warfare was intensifying. As he compared the original 1960s subdivision map with the contemporary blueprints for 125 Elm Street, a chill snaked up Liam's spine. The broker had mentioned a discrepancy. What he found was far more than that. It was a fundamental, glaring error, either overlooked or deliberately concealed during the construction phase of Karen's house. The original plat maps for Elm Street showed a strict setback requirement for all structures, ensuring adequate space between buildings and property lines. This was particularly crucial on lots like Karen's and Liam's, which were unusually narrow at their front, but widened towards the back. The 1960s map clearly indicated a 15-foot setback from the side property line. Karen's McMansion, however, was massive. It sprawled across its lot, pushing the boundaries of what was permissible. Liam found the current blueprints, submitted for the new construction. They showed a setback of a mere 8 feet from his property line. 7 feet. A 7-foot encroachment. His heart began to pound. This wasn't a minor infraction like an overgrown hedge. This was a significant violation of municipal zoning laws. The entire side of Karen's sprawling mansion, the side facing his property and his shed, was built 7 feet too close to his land. That section included her master bedroom suite, a significant portion of her kitchen, and her prized custom-built patio. He leaned back in his chair, the papers scattered around him. His mind reeled. Such a severe setback violation could have massive implications. At best, it would require costly legal action and potentially hefty fines. At worst, the city could demand modifications, even demolition of the encroaching sections. A nightmare scenario that would devastate Karen's perfect, expensive home. Karen had built her empire on a faulty foundation, literally. The irony was almost poetic. She wanted his shed, a structure built with love and integrity, removed for aesthetic reasons, while her own monument to opulence stood in blatant violation of the very rules she preached. Just as this profound realization settled, and Liam heard the familiar roar of a leaf blower, he looked out the window. Karen, dressed in a new, equally immaculate tracksuit, was directing a landscaping crew. They were not working on her property. They were systematically blowing every single fallen leaf from her lawn directly over the fence, onto his meticulously raked yard. He watched, stunned. This wasn't just passive-aggressive. This was deliberately antagonistic. She was daring him. Liam stood up, the municipal documents still spread out on his table, the sheer power of them suddenly palpable. He walked out to his porch. "Karen!" he shouted over the roar of the leaf blowers. She turned, a triumphant, almost manic grin on her face. "Just cleaning up a bit, Liam. Don't want any unsightly debris on our side of the fence, do we?" "You are deliberately blowing your leaves onto my property." "Oh, am I?" She feigned innocence. "They must have just drifted. Happens, you know, with the wind." She gestured vaguely towards the sky, her eyes sparkling with malicious amusement. "Cut it out, Karen." Liam's voice was dangerously low. She just smirked, turning back to her landscapers, issuing more instructions with a flourish. Liam felt a cold, calculated anger rise within him. He returned to the kitchen, scooped up the zoning documents, and put them in a secure file. He wasn't going to engage in petty leaf wars. He had a bigger weapon now. A nuclear option. He called the broker. Mr. Davies. The broker's voice was as calm and measured as ever. "I trust you received the information." "I did," Liam said, his voice tight. The setback violation, 7 feet. How could this happen? Oversight, corruption, or perhaps a combination of both, the broker replied without emotion. Large developments often push the boundaries. Some city inspectors can be persuaded. Others simply miss things. The key is, it's there, it's documented, and it's legally binding. Her property as it stands is non-compliant. What are the implications? Liam asked, needing to hear it confirmed. Significant. Depending on the municipality, it could range from substantial fines and rectification orders to, in extreme cases, a demand for demolition of the offending section. It also severely impacts her ability to sell the property, refinance, or even obtain certain types of insurance. It creates a massive cloud over her investment. Her McMansion is a legal liability. Liam leaned against the counter, picturing Karen's smug face. She has no idea, does she? Unlikely, the broker confirmed. People like Karen Maxwell rarely delve into the granular details of their permits. They pay others to handle it. And those others, if they were complicit or simply incompetent, would have no reason to inform her of such a costly error. She believes her perfect facade is unassailable. So, what's the next step? You have leverage, Mr. Davies. Immense leverage. The decision of how and when to use it is yours. Do you wish to confront her directly, or perhaps gently apply pressure? Remember, her vulnerability is the core of her image. A public exposure of this would be devastating to her ego and her financial standing. Liam thought of the leaf blowers, the attempted demolition, the condescending smiles. He thought of his grandfather's shed, the years of memories, the quiet genius it held. She needs to understand the consequences of her actions, he said, his voice firm. I don't want to destroy her. Not yet. But I want her to feel the fear she tried to instill in me. I want her to realize the true value of what she's dealing with. A measured response, the broker approved. Wise. I suggest you consult with a property lawyer. Not to initiate legal action immediately, but to understand the full scope of your options and to prepare a formal notification. The threat of legal action, backed by irrefutable proof, is often more potent than the action itself. Can you recommend someone? Already done. Check your email. A reputable firm specializing in property law will contact you discreetly within the hour. They are aware of the situation and the Arthur Hemlock connection. They understand the sensitivities. Liam felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. He wasn't just defending his shed anymore. He was defending his legacy, his peace, and sending a very clear message. Just as he ended the call, his front doorbell rang. Liam walked to the door, a new confidence in his stride. He opened it to find Karen, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly askew, her face red with a mixture of anger and panic. Todd was behind her, looking even more flustered than usual. "Liam!" Karen shrieked, foregoing any pretense of politeness. "My internet is completely down! My smart thermostat just set the house to 90 degrees, and my expensive new fountain just exploded!" Liam blinked, feigning surprise. The broker's adjustments were still very much active. "Oh dear, Karen, that sounds inconvenient." "Inconvenient? It's sabotage. It's harassment. You are doing this, aren't you?" "I know. You are." "Karen," Liam said, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. "Perhaps you should consider what happens when you try to force your will on others. Sometimes when you push too hard, things break. Things you didn't even realize were fragile." He paused, letting his gaze drift pointedly towards the side of her house closest to his property line, the very section built on the 7-foot encroachment. Karen followed his gaze, her eyes widening, a flicker of something new in them. Not just anger, but a sudden dawning comprehension. The absolute precision of Liam's words, the way his eyes lingered on that particular section of her house, struck a chord. Had she been so blinded by her own self-importance that she'd missed something crucial? She looked confused. a rare and unsettling sight on her usually composed face. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, but her voice lacked its usual certainty. A sliver of doubt had crept in. "Just a thought," Liam said, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Perhaps you should look into the original planning permissions for your magnificent new property. You might find some very interesting details there. Details that might make a little old shed seem like the least of your problems." The chilling silence after Liam's pointed remark about her property's planning permissions hung heavy in the evening air. Karen, usually so composed, so utterly convinced of her own superiority, stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief, struggling with dawning horror. Todd behind her shifted uncomfortably, sensing the seismic shift in their little suburban war. What are you talking about, Liam?" Karen finally managed, her voice thin, lacking its usual cutting edge. She tried to laugh, a brittle, unconvincing sound. "My property is perfectly legitimate. We had everything checked. We built it to code." Liam simply held her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Did you, Karen? Did you personally verify every single detail, every setback, every zoning regulation? Or did you rely on someone else, someone who perhaps overlooked something significant?" He let the words hang in the air, each one a perfectly aimed arrow. Sometimes, the biggest facades have the weakest foundations. Just a thought. He stepped back, beginning to close his door. Karen lunged forward, her hand shooting out to stop it. "Wait! What do you know? Tell me." Her eyes were wide with a genuine raw panic Liam hadn't seen before. "You'll find out," Liam said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Just as I found out about your little demolition scheme. Karma, Karen. It has a funny way of settling accounts." He shut the door firmly, leaving her staring at the closed wood, her world beginning to tilt. Inside, Liam leaned against the door, a tremor running through him. He hadn't just jabbed, he'd plunged the knife in. He knew Karen well enough to know she wouldn't rest until she understood his cryptic warning. The quiet satisfaction was profound. An hour later, his email buzzed. It was from Sterling and Associates, the property law firm. The email was concise, professional, and straight to the point. They had reviewed the initial information provided by a mutual acquaintance and wished to schedule a confidential meeting to discuss the potential property dispute involving 125 Elm Street. The legal defense fund his grandfather had established, as the broker mentioned, was explicitly referenced as covering the initial consultation. Liam felt a wave of relief. His grandfather, bless his eccentric soul, had truly thought of everything. The next few days were a tense standoff. Karen's usual aggressive posturing vanished. She was rarely seen outside, and when she was, her movements were furtive, her eyes constantly darting towards Liam's property, particularly the side of her house. The leaf blowers were silent. The smart home glitches, courtesy of the broker's unseen hand, also ceased. It was as if Karen had retreated into her fortress, frantically searching for the cracks Liam had alluded to. Liam, meanwhile, met with Ms. Eleanor Vance, the lawyer from Sterling and Associates. She was sharp, no nonsense, with an unnerving ability to grasp complex legal details with ease. He presented her with the municipal documents, the original plat maps, and the contemporary blueprints for 125 Elm Street. Ms. Vance laid the documents out on her polished conference table, meticulously comparing them. Liam watched her face, searching for a reaction. Her expression remained neutral for a long moment, then her eyebrows arched almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Davies," she said, her voice low, "this is significant. A 7-foot setback violation on a property of this size, particularly one so recently constructed and sold, is highly unusual. It suggests either gross negligence on the part of the original developers and city inspectors, or something far more deliberate." "What does it mean for them?" Liam asked, leaning forward. Potentially devastating, both legally and financially. At minimum, substantial fines and a forced remediation, which could mean altering the structure. At worst, if the violation is deemed egregious enough, or if it impacts easements or public safety, the city could order partial or even full demolition of the non-compliant section, and selling the property with such a cloud over it would be nearly impossible. They'd be facing a massive devaluation. Liam absorbed her words. So Karen's McMansion is essentially illegal? Non-compliant is the more accurate term, but yes, essentially. It's a ticking time bomb. The question is, how did it pass inspection, and who signed off on it? Ms. Vance made a note. We'll need to delve deeper into the city's permitting archives for that specific period. The broker, Liam started, the person who got me these documents, he suggested a formal notification, not immediate legal action, but a warning shot. Ms. Vance nodded slowly. A strategic move. It forces their hand. They can't pretend ignorance once they've been formally notified. We can draft a letter, legally precise and irrefutable, outlining the violation and the potential ramifications. It would essentially present them with two options: acknowledge the issue and work towards a resolution, or face immediate legal action from your side. And the resolution? Liam asked. Well, that's where your leverage comes in, Mr. Davies, Ms. Vance said, a knowing look in her eyes. They desperately want to keep their property as is. You want your shed left alone. A mutually beneficial agreement could be reached. Or if they refuse, you hold all the cards. Liam left the lawyer's office feeling a strange mix of vindication and apprehension. He had the weapon. Now he just needed to deploy it. That evening, as dusk settled, Liam watched Karen from his kitchen window. She was pacing her immaculate living room, a phone pressed to her ear, her movements jerky, frantic. She gesticulated wildly, her face a mask of terror. She was clearly talking to someone about the house, and it wasn't Todd. Moments later, Todd burst into the living room, his face ashen, holding a stack of papers. Karen snatched them, her eyes scanning the documents, and then she crumpled, sinking onto her pristine white sofa, her hands shaking. She knew she had found it. The truth about her McMansion, buried in some forgotten file, now unearthed and staring her in the face. Liam didn't know how she'd done it, if she'd dug through the city records herself, or strong-armed some architectural contact. But the reaction was unmistakable. The perfectly constructed facade of Karen Maxwell, the woman who demanded perfection from everyone else, was crumbling from within. He saw Todd try to comfort her, but she pushed him away, her head in, her hands, a low, guttural cry escaping her lips. It wasn't the shriek of outrage he was used to. It was a sound of true, desperate despair. Liam received an email from Ms. Vance that night. Mr. Davies, it read, I've drafted the formal notification. It's ready for your review and signature. Once dispatched, it will irrevocably set things in motion. Attached was a PDF. Notice of property encroachment and zoning violation. He opened the document. The language was cold, legal, and utterly damning. It laid out the precise coordinates, the specific zoning ordinances violated, and the potential consequences. It was a wrecking ball in document form. Liam looked from the document to Karen's darkened house. He pictured the shed, warm and solid, brimming with his grandfather's genius. He thought of Karen's attempt to destroy it, to erase a piece of his history. He thought of her deliberate malice, her self-serving arrogance. He pressed reply. Looks good, Ms. Vance, he typed. Please proceed. Send it tomorrow morning. He knew what this meant. It wasn't just about his shed anymore. It was about justice. And as Liam clicked send, he knew that Karen Maxwell was about to learn the true, brutal cost of her entitlement. Her perfect life built on sand was about to... The click of send resonated louder in Liam's quiet kitchen than any actual sound. It was the sound of a die cast, a line crossed, a silent declaration of war delivered with the cold precision of legal prose. He felt a strange mix of exhilaration and unease. He wasn't a vindictive man, but Karen had pushed him to the brink, threatening not just his property, but the very legacy of his grandfather. This wasn't about winning. It was about protecting what was sacred. The next morning, the air on Elm Street was thick with unspoken tension. Liam watched from his porch as the mail truck delivered to Karen's house. He imagined the crisp, official envelope nestled amongst her usual junk mail and glossy catalogs. He pictured her opening it, her perfectly manicured fingers tearing. Open the seal, her eyes scanning the damning legal jargon. He didn't have to imagine for long. A blood-curdling scream tore through the morning quiet, echoing across the perfectly manicured lawns. It was Karen. Her front door burst open, and she stumbled out onto her porch, the notice of property encroachment and zoning violation clutched in her trembling hand like a death warrant. Her face was a contorted mask of pure, unadulterated terror and rage. Her hair was disheveled, her expensive tracksuit rumpled. She looked less like the queen of Crestwood Estates and more like a harried, desperate woman whose world had just imploded. "Liam!" Her voice was hoarse, raw, stripped of its usual condescending polish. "What have you done?" Liam rose from his swing, slowly, deliberately. He walked to his fence line, his expression calm, almost pitying. "I told you, Karen," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Karma has a funny way of settling accounts." Todd appeared behind her, looking utterly bewildered, clutching his own set of papers. "Karen, what is this?" "The bank just called. They said there's a hold on our mortgage application. And the city—" He trailed off, his eyes wide with incomprehension. Karen ignored him, her gaze fixed on Liam, blazing with a mixture of hatred and fear. "You think this is a game? You think you can just destroy my life over a stupid shed?" "You tried to destroy my life, Karen," Liam countered, his voice rising slightly, the years of quiet resentment finally surfacing. "You tried to take my grandfather's legacy, to illegally demolish a piece of my family history because it didn't fit your perfect shallow world. You sent people to tear it down. You tried to make me homeless." "It's just an old shed," she wailed, tears beginning to stream down her face, ruining her meticulously applied mascara. "A piece of junk!" "To you, maybe," Liam said, his eyes hardening. "To me, it's worth more than your entire McMansion. And unlike your house, Karen, it was built honestly." She visibly flinched at his words, the implication of her property's illegality hitting home. "This is insane! I'll sue you! I'll ruin you! I'll make sure you lose everything!" "You're already losing everything, Karen," Liam said, gesturing towards her house, then to the letter in her hand. "That letter isn't from me. It's from a law firm. And the city. It's the consequence of building a lie. You pushed. You pulled. And now the foundation of your perfect life is cracking, all because of a 7-foot encroachment." Todd, finally understanding, let out a choked sound. He stared at Karen, then at the house, a look of profound betrayal on his face. 7 feet. "Karen, what is he talking about? You said everything was legal. You handled the paperwork." Karen spun on him, her face contorted. "Don't you dare blame me, Todd! That crooked developer, that incompetent inspector, it's their fault!" "No, Karen," Liam interjected, shaking his head. "It's your fault. Your arrogance. Your entitlement. You wanted to bully your way through life, to dictate reality to everyone around you. But reality and the law have a way of catching up." Her shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a desperate guttural sob. The dream house, the symbol of her status, the foundation of her manufactured happiness, was now a monument to her deceit. The legal ramifications, the potential fines, the forced demolition of a part of her home, or even a full teardown. The sheer financial ruin and public humiliation of it all crashed down on her. "What do you want?" she whimpered, her voice barely audible, completely broken. What do you want?" "I'll do anything. Just make this go away." Liam looked at her, truly looked at her. The woman who had been so sure, so formidable, was now a shivering wreck. And in that moment he felt no triumph, only a quiet understanding of the emptiness that had driven her. "I want nothing from you, Karen," Liam said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "Except for one thing. Leave me alone. Leave my shed alone. Forever. And acknowledge that you were wrong." She stared at him, then at the shed, a flicker of something in her eyes. Not understanding of its true value, but perhaps for the first time, a glimmer of respect for its steadfast presence. She nodded slowly, defeated. "Okay," she whispered. "Just leave us alone." Liam nodded. He turned and walked back into his house, leaving Karen and Todd standing on their ruined lawn, their perfect dream collapsing around them. The formal legal notice set in motion a chain of events that unfolded swiftly. The city launched a full investigation into the original permits for 125 Elm Street, uncovering a web of irregularities and potentially fraudulent approvals. The developer who had built the McMansion faced massive lawsuits and investigations. Karen and Todd Maxwell found themselves embroiled in a legal and financial quagmire, their assets frozen, their dream home turning into an expensive, unsellable nightmare. The news, fueled by the leaked zoning documents, courtesy, Liam suspected, of the broker's network, spread like wildfire through Crestwood Estates, turning Karen into an instant pariah. Months later, a for sale sign appeared on Karen and Todd's property. The price was dramatically reduced, and the house lingered on the market, a constant reminder of its underlying legal issues. Liam heard whispers that they had to sell at a significant loss, desperate to escape the mounting legal fees and the crushing public shame. Eventually, a developer bought it, not to live in, but to tear down the entire side that violated the setback, drastically altering the house's original grand design before attempting to resell it. The McMansion was defaced, a monument to a hubris that literally overstepped its bounds. Liam watched it all unfold from his porch, from the quiet sanctuary of his garden. His shed stood undisturbed, a testament to resilience, a fortress of secrets. The broker never called for payment. He simply sent a final, cryptic message. "Justice is its own currency, Mr. Davies, and Arthur's legacy is now secure." Liam went into the shed. He ran his hand over the worn workbench, over the luminescent planter glowing softly in the corner, over the complex machinery of the acoustic harmonizer. He knew the true value here wasn't just in the inventions, but in the peace they now afforded him. The knowledge that his grandfather's ingenuity and the quiet integrity of his own life had ultimately triumphed over entitlement and malice. The garden was quiet again, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves, and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the extraordinary secrets contained within the humble, unassuming shed. Karen Maxwell had learned in the most painful way possible that some things, though they might appear ordinary, held an immeasurable and deeply protected worth, and that trying to take what wasn't yours always came with a price.